to say after partition, people did not choose to stay here. The elections prior to the partition of 1946 spoke volumes. And that's a very clear decision taken at the ballot. And therefore, when you choose to speak about history, let's be clear that perhaps practical considerations came into existence which prevented a mass migration, but certainly not patriotic considerations or Bharatiya considerations. I think that myth needs to be busted, and we cannot sell it any further. 3. On Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, well, while I have several reservations with Dr. Ambedkar, the one thing that he was crystal clear about in his book, Pakistan or the Partition of India, which was published on the eve of the partition, 2 books were published by Rajendra Prasad in 1946 and Dr. Ambedkar in 1946. In which he clearly says that the so-called Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, or the syncretic culture that is celebrated over and over again, is a product of the incomplete conversion of the converted Hindu to Islam. And therefore, multiple waves of attempts have been made on a regular basis to remove the remnants of that Hindu-ness from that particular convert, which is what has been pushed in this country as what we know as Wahhabism. To say that the new convert shall identify himself with the early converts to Islam, and therefore you cannot have any ties whatsoever or any cultural practices whatsoever which remind you of your ancestor. That starts with the language, that moves to dressing, so on and so forth. So let's be clear. If acrimony is the result or is going to be the result of a discussion with respect to the medieval period in current day Bharat and contemporary Bharat, that is because there are still people who relate to this particular person or this particular period. Had that not been the case, why should there be a resistance with respect to the reclamation of a particular, let's say, structure that was built by an invader? Whether it's Babri Masjid or Gyanvapi Mandir or so on and so forth, these were built by invaders. Obviously, they were not built after the independence of this particular country. This is not a structure that has come into existence after 15th of August 1947. Why do you relate to this particular structure? Because the mindset that has been imposed on you at the peril of the sword and let's say at the pain of death prevents you from accepting your past, and therefore it's going to be a constant tussle each time there's a discussion with respect to the past. So I refuse to buy the fact that history is no more relevant or that it's possible for us to have these discussions objectively. I agree with Mr. Verma on this point. It cannot be objective. That's exactly why I concluded my first opening submission by saying all of us have our biases. It's impossible for us to say that we don't have biases. We are human beings, impossible. We may choose not to bring out certain proclivities and, let's say, ideological leanings to the fore for reasons of pragmatism, whatever it may be. But let the evidence speak for itself. But if the evidence leads to a different conclusion and it has consequences on the street or elsewhere, then the people who choose to resort to the street merely because truth is being presented in a public forum are to be blamed. History is not to be blamed, and certainly not those people who wish to present that.